Welcome to this. All right. Welcome to this briefing of what is happening with regards to the ECN and the fraudulent activities commissioned and owned by SWAPO, more particular the SWAPO regional coordinator in the south, in Karas, Mumbala. What is his first name? I don't even know his first name. Huh? Matthews Mumbala, sanctioned by the Politburo of SWAPO. So I will hand over to our leader and chief change campaigner, the Honorable Bernardo Swarboy, to brief the members of the media and the public in general of what is transpiring in the Karas region as well as in the Hartap region.
Well, thank you very much, Leader Henny. We have always known that the work that we have done as LPM to campaign on the ground, raise the issues that are important for the people of Namibia, will eventually catch up with SWAPO, and that a huge number of Namibian citizens have begun to walk away permanently from SWAPO and its politics. This has certainly been the case in many other regions of this country, including the Karas and the Hartap region. What is important in those two regions is that the last elections was a clear defeat for SWAPO, even under its own fraudulent system, where LPM won constituency after constituency in those two regions. That today SWAPO is essentially targeting those regions with fraudulent activities. The evidence is so overwhelming in respect of their loss for last year, as well as their loss, which will even be with a higher margin in the coming regional and local elections, given the work that we've done in those two regions. And you could have seen also, if you had followed, that we beat them very well in the by-elections in Keetmanshoop Urban. As a result of those losses, Karas and Hartap seems to have been identified as the strongholds of LPM. Our assessment shows that we are in these elections at least going to conquer about 33 local authorities and 5 regions, which includes Kunene, particularly Kunene South, which includes Erongo, and which includes Khomas regions. Our assessment further is also that we are going to make huge inroads and will possibly govern in coalition format with other political parties in Omaheke as well as in Ojovenjupa. That having been said, in preparation for the elections, the registration of voters for the supplementary process started last week, or rather this week, Monday. We have always been suspicious of the plans that SWAPO would come up with to try to negatively affect the outcome of the elections by using fraudulent tactics. One of the most notable fraudulent tactics that they have always been using is the deployment of military and police personnel to post in strategic areas where they have been weak. We have been carefully watching them, and you could see that as part of those suspicious arrangements, the Minister of Defense has been very visible in traveling around in those regions to see how they can use the military personnel to take them to Karasburg, to take them to Keetmans, and to ensure that LPM does not win Karasburg East, Keetmanshoop Urban, and some other constituencies. However, they have devised an additional plan, as we suspected, of importing part of our northern communities, poor ordinary Namibian citizens who happen to be of Oshiwambo descent, to the southern parts of the country. In particular, it is our information that they have been transporting at least 5,000. In total, at least 5,000 citizens from the northern side of the country, in particular from places like Ruakana, where the regional coordinator of SWAPO, Mr. Mumbara, comes from. They have done this in Karasburg West constituency, where he, Mumbala, has an interest to contest as a constituency councillor. They have also deployed people in Karasburg East, in particular at Komsberg. They have also deployed people in Keeponsop Urban. They have also deployed people in Mariental Urban, as well as Rehoboth East and Mariental Rural constituencies. We are also informed that they are trying to deploy people elsewhere in areas of the Omaheke. What has happened is that officials of the ECN employed to facilitate the supplementary registration process in these areas picked up clearly outside individuals coming for registration as they were queuing up. Many of these people, upon being asked where they come from, have honestly communicated to some of these officials that they hail from particular villages in the Umsati region. They were then told that these people must go and register in areas where they come from because that's the requirement. But some of the team leaders were intimidated and harassed. Some were just not strong enough and considered to register as voters in local authorities of Keetmans, Komsberg area, for regional also, these individuals. What is clear is there's a twofold strategy. In some areas where there are no local authorities, these people are being registered for regional council elections exclusively, such as in Karasburg West, such as in Karasburg East, with specific reference to Komsberg, which is a grape farm, where a huge component of SWAPO supporters have historically been employed at the grape and date farms, and which has been used by SWAPO to try to counterbalance the voting bloc of Karasburg proper, Arnhemsvlei, Warmbad, Gabes, and Gruno. They are trying to boost ethnic numbers at Komsberg and therefore to influence ethnically the overall distribution of votes in Karasburg East constituency, precisely as they are doing also in Keetmanshoop Urban. In Karasburg West, if I quickly go back, the last elections for the current councillor, Paulus Ephraim, has been a disaster. He won with a little over 300 or 500 votes there. And the Kavango community in Karasburg West, in particular at Ozengia, have joined LPM in massive numbers and have decided to vote for LPM in massive numbers. Here we are talking of about a total of in excess of 12,000 voters. Now, the number of 5,000 that they have started to bring down is not the total number. The numbers, we are told by intelligence sources, is bound to increase to at least 15,000. But they are counting on a poor voter turnout and on a continuous community bloc that they will have mobilized on the day of voting to go and vote as one bloc. That is what they are hoping for, so that they don't have to mobilize the local voters, they don't have to struggle with the local voters, but that they have a bloc of voters that has been brought specifically for the purpose of voting, whereafter they will be returned to the places where they come from. The same is happening in Mariental Urban. In fact, even this morning, people have seen an unnatural influx and a presence of individuals who happen to be Oshiwambo speaking, but are clearly not from that area. Remember, we are being specific about the things we know, because we have also our teams that are working in the ECN, but also as part of the process of rallying voters to go and register. We have teams that are very active, that see things, that analyze things, that follow through, and that consult and engage on these issues. That's why we can say there is an unnatural influx of, in particular, Oshiwambo-speaking community members in Marintal, in Keetmanshoop, in Komsberg, in Karasburg West, as well as in Rehoboth as we speak. It is really, I must say, fellow Namibians, it is really most unfortunate that at this day and age we will have to speak in the terms of Oshiwambo voters that are brought down from Umsati and other areas at a time when we have to build a strong, unified nation. It is unfortunate, and it is very uncomfortable for us to have to do what we are doing now, but we have to speak the truth so that the country and the people out there, as well as the international community, takes note of social re-engineering processes that SWAPO is busy with. What has then happened is that some of those officials that are pro-SWAPO within the ECN have done a very particular thing in places like Keetmanshoop and Marintal and so on, where local Nama and Afrikaans-speaking voters who do not have, although resident, but do not have water and electricity bills, have deliberately been shunned and prevented from registering for local in Keetmans, for local in Karasburg, for local in Marintal, for local in Rehoboth, and so on. Whereas without any residential address, without any water and electricity bills from municipalities, these imported voters have been registered almost at a level of 80% as we speak for the past 2 days. And so this matter is so serious and indicates a fundamental desperation of SWAPO party that they have to import people from the north to boost their numbers. But what are the issues that we still further question? During a lockdown, the police are supposed, together with the defense, to monitor traveling of people from area to area. How is it that Iveco buses were allowed in huge numbers, as well as bigger buses, 65-seaters, were allowed in big numbers to proceed through roadblocks and other places to transport people at night to these posts? How is it possible that police would not notice a huge, well-organized, well-orchestrated convoy of people traveling from one point to another during a lockdown? So it brings to question either the complicity of the police and the defense officials that have to impose COVID regulations, and indeed indicates a grand scheme in which SWAPO has decided by hook or crook to import voters to affect outcome of elections in a way that advantages them. Why is this not strange for us? In the campaign last year, you would have seen that SWAPO deliberately bussed in people merely to attend their political party rallies. And therefore it is not a strange incident for SWAPO to load people on buses and to take them from one destination to another destination. They have done it from Otjiwarongo to the rally in Grootfontein, where they were transporting people by train. They have done it from Windhoek, Otjiwarongo, Oshakati to the big meeting they've had in Katima Mulilo. They have done it in their rally for Gobabas, where they took people from Windhoek to Gobabas to boost the attendance of their event, what they call so-called star rallies. I'm saying this to indicate to whoever is listening that there has been a history of SWAPO in trying to look good, in trying to boast its numbers, to transport people, ordinary poor people, from one point to the other to attend meetings. There has been a history of SWAPO to transport people for employment purposes at the expense of local people from one region to another, to influence local ethnic dynamics. There has been a history of SWAPO to transport people from one point to the other to influence voter numbers. It is nothing new. What is now new is the threat of a defeat by more than 80% in Karas and Hardap is so real, more than they have analyzed would be possible. And having sent down the Minister of Defense and the leaders assigned to Karas within their system, such as Lucia Witbooi, Maureen Hinda, and so on, they have seen how people in those two regions, as well as in the rest of the country, have essentially departed from SWAPO. And when they now devised this plan, and when they were comfortable enough that it can work, Mumbala and Lucia Witbooi announced this week that they stand a great chance, with all confidence, to win all 7 constituencies in the Karas region. So they hatched a plan. They set the money. They began to transport people. They saw people arriving. They were then comfortable to announce that they will win. Now, any normal person would first and foremost tell you they are lying. They are not going to win. We are going to give them the biggest defeat they have never seen in the history of defeats of a political party. That is one. Number 2, between last year, when they were defeated by LPM in that region, as well as in Hardap, and this year, what is there materially that has changed in the lives of people, in the politics and policies of the SWAPO government, that will bring those voters back to SWAPO? Absolutely nothing. But it is because they have created an artificial voter bloc, a mobile voters company, that they are now proud to announce a likely victory. It's unfortunate that they are using the poorest of the poor Namibians, that they are using our people from the north, that they are abusing our people from the north to join a system of majoritarianism instead of political parties in a democracy contesting elections on the issues, and whoever wins does so honestly, and whoever doesn't win accepts the defeat graciously and moves on. They can't imagine losing because they never thought it possible that they would lose. Here is the thing also for you to consider. As they are transporting citizens from the northern banks of the country to the southern side to infest the numbers game in their favor, they are opening up the border of Angola to bolster their numbers in the north. This is the grand scheme of SWAPO. Social re-engineering, so that they keep an artificial power base. What is the issue for us? When you are a citizen, the biggest power you have comes from the fact that you are the sovereign. And as a sovereign, you determine who handles the affairs of the state, both at national, regional, and local level, as a sovereign, because you are a citizen. The power of the sovereign to determine who governs at which levels of the state is through the ballot box. And through the ballot box, in votes, in this instance, this election, where votes are area specific, constituency specific, local authority specific, the laws are designed in such a way that the local person decides who he wants or she wants in a local authority, who he wants or who she wants in a regional council. For the first time, apart from the historic defeat that they've experienced from the UDF, for the first time, SWAPO reckons that LPM will give it the biggest political upset ever in its 60-year history. Yeah. And they need to do something urgently to prevent that. But they do it in such a dirty and malicious, fraudulent way that it has come out. I can tell you this, with this information that has come out, and we are still gathering additional information. People are giving us papers. ECN officials that are deployed there through our system, they are opposing them now. They are not joining the fray to steal elections. They are opposing them internally. Through the evidence that we have so far obtained, you can see the most desperate attempt by SWAPO to cling to power. But it knows its days are numbered. Because while they have tried by all means to label us as a tribal party, they realize that we have made heavy inroads in Oshakati, Enana, Ondangwa, Omfia, Rundu, Kurenkuru, and Katima Mulilo. They know it. They have seen it. They are afraid of it. It gives them sleepless nights. They have also seen that in communities where we have not been doing well because of the land issue, we have explained to these communities what our position is on the land issue. And you see a heavy and an unprecedented influx of membership from the white community. That is why it took a Minister of Defense to utter a panic attack statement against white people, as he did at a military base. It is for this reason that we have since written to 23 embassies represented in the Republic of Namibia, including such embassies as those of the United States, United Kingdom, the European Union at large, India, South Africa, Botswana, many other embassies, Tanzania, 23 of them, to indicate that there is a Zimbabweanization of our politics on the horizon. And the playbook of SWAPO is the playbook of ZANU-PF. They do exactly as ZANU-PF has done. So we have our options. What we are saying is that SWAPO should stop what they are busy with. Mambala and Karibus must stop what they are busy with. We have asked our people to go street to street, location to location, and to identify those individuals that are not from the areas originally. We have said that pictures must be taken, documents must be provided. We're waiting for some documents from inside the ECN sources, and we are told that ECN has called a meeting Saturday, and it seems that they are suspending. Not so sure whether it's entirely true, but what we are told from some sources, which we are still verifying, is that Saturday they will have a meeting to discuss the Karasburg West, Karasburg East, tomorrow, yeah? Karasburg West, Karasburg East, Cape Monsop urban question of these artificial voters that have been brought in to register as voters. Of course, the idea is to register them. After they are done, take them back to Ruakan and other places in the north, and then have them ready again for elections to transport them, and thereafter take them back again. You see how SWAPO is playing with our vulnerable communities. It is an evil party that has evil intent for Namibia. Its whole political program of action is against the interest of the people of the Republic of Namibia. And so we will be writing today to the ECN asking for more details. We will be getting some further information from officials at ECN, and we will keep the media and the nation abreast of what is happening. Whatever legal instruments are available to us within the Electoral Act, we will exploit those, including things like objections to the voters' roll that will be published if they proceed with it. But our view is, first, the registration process has been tainted in these two regions. A tainted registration process cannot be deemed as a fair and legally valid administrative action. Once an administrative action is tainted, such an action must be cancelled and the process must start over de novo. In other words, anew. For that reason, we are asking ECN, start anew the registration process in Taras and in Hardap regions, because it's tainted. ECN will never be able to guarantee a pure, fair, just, and clean supplementary registration process given the information that we've had. Secondly, and unfortunately, the ECN law does not make provision for expulsion in contesting certain elections in areas where a particular political party has been found to do things that are untoward. We are still going to look carefully at anything that the law provides us, but ordinarily, we would have wanted SWAPO party to be barred from taking part in the elections of those constituencies and local authorities where they have decided to bring in people from outside. That would be a good, punitive, and democratic process that will teach any political party the most appropriate lesson, not to do social re-engineering and to threaten our stability as a country and our unity as a people during this difficult period of time. We would also ask that the police chiefs in those two regions be suspended and that a proper investigation be done as to how such numbers of people have been allowed to go through roadblocks without good reasons given. They must explain. Because what had happened is when they were asked in the queue, where they come from, these people honestly said the names of the villages where they were picked up. And of course, we are talking through other systems with these people because the phones are tapped. These officials that are giving us this information, their phones are tapped. We've asked them today to go to work and to get sourced information for us, those that have spoken to us, so that we can get the areas. But the area that stands out is Ruakana. The region that stands out is Umsati. Those are what we can so far confirm, the areas that stand out as part of this whole broad-based conspiracy of SWAPO to try to influence things. But I want to say this, and this is my last point. You know, SWAPO is playing. Without money, without any corrupt help from either local or international businesses, with the little that we didn't have, we here built a formidable political party with young people who were called names, as a party called names of being an ethnic party. We have struggled very hard for 4 years to build a brand that Namibians can feel that they can belong to. We have worked extremely hard day and night and traveled this country without fish rod money, without tender money, without mining rod money, without Jack Wang's money. We have, for the first time in the history of this country, unlike those that want to be SWAPO sometimes or want to be in coalition with SWAPO, we have built a new political platform that every Namibian child can be proud of. And we are firstly and foremostly a peaceful political party. But I want to say this, that SWAPO should not forget the biblical principle that an eye for an eye is still a relevant political tool in defense of democracy. A tooth for a tooth is still a relevant political weapon to defend democracy. The way this thing is unfolding, and that SWAPO then thinks that after election results are announced, that there will be tranquility on the streets of these places that I mentioned, of Keetmans, of Karasburg, of West, Karasburg West, of Marental Rural or Urban, or Riabo, or Windhoek, or Kunene South. If SWAPO is of the opinion that we will just absorb and speak about democracy and peace, and that we'll just accept howsoever they win, any malicious and fraudulent win, and that we'll just keep on complaining, and that we will be sort of put in a corner by them by so-called rule of law principles, they are mistaken. There will be chaos on the streets of Keetmanshoek, of Marental, of Korigas, of Gobabas, of Windhoek, of Wolfish Bay, of Swakopmund, like they have never seen before. There will be huge, 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 huge chaos like they've never seen before. They will try to send in the military. There will be a chasing of the military. There will be throwing of defense capability against the military. If they think that we will accept results, howsoever they were generated, they are wrong. We will fight back, not just with the mouth, but with every legitimate tool available at our disposal. Those of you who are journalists, just go and see how people have worked in various areas of this country and what flags they have put on top of their houses, street to street, house to house, in many of these places. Go and see. Go and see the number of SWAPO flags that have been removed versus the number of LPM flags that have been put up. Yeah. Go and see the number of SWAPO people that have left SWAPO, some of whom have availed themselves very sincerely to serve as potential constituency and local authority councillors, which has forced SWAPO to send out mission after mission after mission to beg these people to come back to SWAPO without any success. Go and see. Go and see the success of our mobilization work, where the rank and the file of SWAPO has been deconstructed, and that they are unable to even conduct simple section meetings in many of these regions. Go and see. Go and listen to conversations that SWAPO leaders in structures have, that they cannot even call a simple meeting of a branch because people refuse to go and attend branch meetings. They say they are LPM.
Yes.
Go and see it. And because we know this, and because we are on the ground, and because we have worked hard without any corrupt money assisting us, and because we are serious about unification of this country and social transformation, we are not going to take any result that does not represent the democratic expression of the people into a legitimate space of acceptability, and therefore that will be it. If they don't stop, the way SWAPO is going and doing what they've been doing and thinking that there's not a new day that has come to this country that will reject very terribly what they stand for on the streets, that day has come, and they must realize that they have fallen. Nobody can pick them up. And they have declared it themselves. That is why they also had, without anybody asking them, they have had a post-mortem. In other words, an examination that you do after a person has died. They did it themselves. Now, after they are dead, they want the ghosts of SWAPO to haunt us. And we are not going to be haunted by ghosts that are being brought in to represent a strength that does not exist. So I urge people in those constituencies, stand up. We'll see how ECN responds. We'll look at our options. We'll act accordingly. But stand up, get registered, go and vote for LPM, as you should, given the circumstances where this country has been destroyed by SWAPO party. Thank you very much.
Thanks, the colleagues, for listening to our leader attentively. Now I think the other press who came late lost out a bulk of what was being discussed here, the Namibian and NBC. Maybe you could have an interview afterwards, but I want to allow maybe the Sun newspaper and Eagle FM, if they have questions that they can quickly ask, and then afterwards maybe you can have a quick interview about what the bulk of the interview is. So Sheligan, Ohone, Sheligan, and then Sakis, you can ask questions.
With the state of emergency coming to, ending in September, or coming to an end essentially, what is your position as a party, and would you be willing to support an extension?
No. We will not be, and we are not willing to support an extension of any state of emergency. There is no emergency. There is a state of hunger, of poverty, of disease, a state of corruption, a state of nepotism. We will also not support that. We will also not support any lockdown of any sort, none whatsoever. The economy has been destroyed, business people are suffering, lives have been dismantled, yet the executive and parliamentarians are earning the same salaries. No salary of any minister or any parliamentarian, including us, has been cut. Other people's salaries have been cut. Other people's lives have been destroyed. Other people's business opportunities have been destroyed. Businesses are closing down like they've never done before. Companies are going into insolvency. There is nothing. There never was. There isn't now. There never will be any state of emergency extension or any lockdown that we will support. They have mishandled this flu called COVID. They have mishandled this flu and abused the flu for the purposes, this COVID, of their own political expediency, to try to blame everything on COVID. South Africa's economic activity has slowed down to 51% lockdown. Namibia's economy is collapsing, lockdown. But they go and auction natural resources and lie about what they actually got. We can't have a state of emergency in which Vilo and his puppets pretend to be the coup d'etat military leaders that refuse to answer. We can't have a lockdown continue, a state of emergency continue, in which there is no clear answer regarding the presence of at least 3,500 military personnel and artillery and other military hardware from the People's Republic of China, as indicated to us by others, and we have tried by all means in writing to verify, as responsible leaders should, from the Ministry of Defense. They began to lecture us about things like Bandung Conference, and we have lectured them back. We have then also indicated to embassies that this government is going into a state of dictatorship, and so therefore no, there is no need for a lockdown.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. My name is Shirley Peterson from Eagle FM. You indicated that there have been buses coming from the north going to the south. Have you notified the police yourself that this has been happening? Have they given you any response to it? You said that you spoke of the defense minister and trying to intimidate, that is, the white business owners. Have you spoken to any business owners? And what did they told you about it? Yeah, that's all.
I think I'll give Henny that question. You want to?
Yeah, my question is that
All right.
my name is Akils from the LPM. I came a little bit late. I'm not sure whether I missed out on the evidence that was presented. If there was any evidence that was presented to verify the claims that you are making, that people are being transported or anything. I want to ask one question. I listened to the audio that was shared on social media, where you made these claims that buses are coming in, bringing in people and other things. But you mentioned something that really caught my attention. You say that it is an indication of the declaration of civil war by the Southern government. I've listened to you quite attentively for the past few years at numerous occasions. You have been referring to chaos, civil war, and other things that are of disruptive nature. As a leader of a political party, you have influence over a considerable number of people or a portion of population. Anything that you say, for example, this claim of declaration of civil war, has an influence on your followership. And people will not wait for your direct orders, but sometimes they will act out of sympathy with you. And my extension, when you make a statement, it means that.
What is the question, Saki?
Yeah, I just want to ask.
I hear what you are saying, but can you summarize? So
Yeah.
I want to do justice to your question.
Yeah, I just want to ask, are you perhaps, can you tell us where these threats of civil war are coming from? And are you yourself advocating for civil war? Or what measure do you think should be taken to solve these other problems that you mentioned? And I just wanted to ask you whether you are an anarchist.
Okay, I will take that question and Henny will take the other one. I don't know which jurisdiction Saki was living in for the past 5 or 6 years when Tengo was threatening us with civil war from Rundu, where they paraded the military. When at the land conference, Albert Kawana was threatening us with civil war, and Stefanus Goliath had to ask at the conference, at the land conference, to Albert Kawana, on whose doorstep are you laying the blame for civil war? Every time we spoke about the land issue and about many other issues that are bothering us, about corruption, SWAPO would always threaten people not to take peace and stability for granted, that the country will go up in flames. So we have been living under the threat of a collapse of peace and stability when we started to take on SWAPO. And that is how Namibians have for the past 30 years been intimidated and harassed by SWAPO. That is why SWAPO in its structure still today has a Secretary for Defense in a free and independent country. Go and check which other political party after independence I'm not talking about Veterans Affairs, but to have a Secretary for Defense as a political party which is no longer a freedom movement, but a political party. How do you still have a Secretary for Defense? What does it tell you about the political and ideological posture about such a political party? Secondly, we have been responding in preponderance to threats that we were given all the time. We don't go around here or anywhere propagating for civil war. We never do that. Rather, when you listen carefully to what we are saying, we are always warning about the seeds of social discontent, about the seeds of injustice, about structural violence that currently exists in the Namibian society, in state institutions. And we've always been telling many of the listeners, including the journalists, to go and look at theories such as those of Galton, where structural violence continues to be a defining hallmark of the post-colonial, post-independent African state. You can see it even now in countries like DRC, where structural violence is what is used to impose the will of the political elite on the poor and the vulnerable. Institutionalized violence. It is precisely because of that institutionalized violence, which the media sometimes doesn't question, that a Minister of Defense can use a military parade and point his guns to a section of the Namibian community. You should have asked why he is pointing his fingers, but more than that, his guns, to a community in the Republic of Namibia that is not even propagating for picking up guns, but merely is participating in debates around the direction of the country, about the state of the economy. So if you ask questions of civil war to a political party leader who is not in government, you would first be advised to go and read how the construct of the post-colonial African state has been the gatekeeper of violence and has continued to use taxpayers' money to further and further erode democratic space and further strengthen its violent monopoly over citizens throughout this continent. Even those revolutionaries like Kwame Nkrumah, then became victims to structural violence that they were fighting against. They became, rather not the victims, but the perpetrators of structural violence. So analyze my statement in the broadest possible historic trajectory of where the society of Namibia and the broader continent of Africa has found itself. I have also said, Saki, before you came, that SWAPO's playbook is an exact replica of ZANU-PF's political playbook. And that gives you an indication of how ZANU-PF threatened legitimate voices with assassinations, with harassment, with exiling leaders, with poisoning them, as they have done with Morgan Chwangra, with beating up political opponents, including social re-engineering processes that ZANU started, which even uprising in Matabeleland that resulted in the mass murder of a huge number of the people of Matabeleland and so on. SWAPO follows that playbook to the letter and the spirit, and we see it every day becoming more and more evident. Now, the rule of law applies not only to a government, but it applies to people. Today, Saki, ordinary Namibians who didn't take land from anybody in Okahanja, who after 60 years, after 70 years, some of them, I went there, they told me these stories, have never owned a piece of land in the place of their birth, today are appearing in a court in Windhoek, where in the affidavit of the minister, Erastus Utoni, after agreeing to give people access to a piece of land without any sanitation or anything, at least for them to build their shack, agreeing with them, he retreats from that agreement and says in his affidavit, people must go back to where they come from. That is structural violence. And people are saying, but where we came from is Okahanja. That's our land. That's our ancestral land. We come from Okahanja. When we have to go back to our ancestral land, it will be Okahanja. We just want access, not even ownership for now, just access to a small 200-300 square meter land to build a shack. And this government, on the principle of structural violence that they impose on communities, decides to send in massive numbers of military, massive numbers of police, and they were beating people actually in Okahanja 2-3 weeks ago. 2-3 weeks ago. These are unarmed women, older men, and children. Structural violence. Structural violence. This is what we're exposed to every day. So when you're asking that question, analyze the historic trajectory, not only of this country, but of the continent, and locate the question in the context of the frustrations that legitimate democratic forces of the post-colonial continent have for years expressed, for which they have been killed, been imprisoned, as is the case now in Zimbabwe, for which they have been assassinated. You can go and look at Bobi Wine and the sufferings in Uganda. You can look at some of the things that are being done by Mugafuli in Tanzania. You can even look at DRC. You can look at other countries in West Africa where democratic forces are subject to institutionalized violence of the state. Now, there comes a time when people and the fears they have for life, for liberty, becomes irrelevant. There comes a time in every man's life where you can run into an oncoming military vehicle for the sake of the future of your children. When a ruling party decides to diminish your citizenship by imposing other citizens on you in the place where you have the right to determine who must govern you, when a ruling party diminishes your right to freely and fairly and without any hindrance or let to express a vote for a party of your choice, when such a ruling party does that and continues to do it blatantly, you surely can start to defend yourself. You surely can start to defend yourself. So I've never been someone that propagates for violence, unlike what you are saying. Never. I have propagated for defense of rights, of freedoms, for responsibilities that we have toward our children and future generations, that we must give them a better country than we have received from our forebears. And in doing so, the language sometimes is very tough. The expressions and the conduct is sometimes very hard to comprehend. But the truth of the matter is that we do not have any single monopoly force. We do not even have, even if you search now, even inside these offices, a single machete or a single stone to throw to an army. We don't. All we have are our bodies, our minds, and the vision that we stand for to improve this country. So when you are structuring the question in the way that you are doing, it betrays, at least for me, a particular orientation that perhaps wishes to propagate that LPM is a violent movement, because you are saying, I have listened to you for many years and you have always spoken about violence and so on. After the elections, I remember when I was speaking at Tila's guest house, I said, I now understand why in some African countries, after elections were not done freely and fairly, some people started to take up guns. I said, I now understand. There was a friend of mine from the US that said, oof, that talk is not good. But when I explained to him that I now understand, he actually became much more radical than I was. When Sakius, a political party, has done honest work to mobilize people on the basis of political programs, on economic policies that will implement, and you have convinced people in the country to follow that vision, surely you are allowed to be frustrated, but we don't get frustrated. But you are allowed to be irritated and to be extremely concerned when another political party doesn't use the same instruments to garner support, but uses other instruments that are outside of legitimate processes to claim an artificial strength and therefore to rule you with impunity and to pretend that they are in charge while they are not. Within the democratic space, and this is the last one I'm making, and you will answer the other. Within the democratic space, surely people have a right to rise up, to speak up, as Mandela did, as Luther King did, as all other people did in fighting for the freedom of this country. And that is the right that I'm asserting in the most progressive and patriotic way. And that's all we are saying. As we said, it's painful for us to be speaking about Namibians being transported from one part of the country to impose a will that does not exist on other communities. It's painful. It sounds divisive, but that is the truth that we are faced with.
All right, thanks to Sheligan from Eagle FM. Know what they say in the Communist Manifesto? Karl Marx and Engels wrote a good thing. They were looking at the class interests, the antagonisms that exist. And there is a famous quote, the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of the class struggle. So as long as there are human beings, the class struggle will never end. Now what leads people to move from an era of peacefulness to the increased level of consciousness, which results into protest and action, which might even lead to violence in some instances, is that the rulers, the governing parties, and the elite pact begin to undermine, mishandle, and abuse the resources of the people of the country. Now, this is typical. How did Arab Spring start? It started with Mohamed Bouazizi, set himself ablaze. The guy was just there in the street trying to sell tomatoes, onions, and the police comes and harassed him. And that's how it started. Today, we have the aftermath of the Arab Spring, which I'm happy. It removed guys like the ones from Egypt, Mubarak, and Gaddafi. The extraordinary crazy person like Gaddafi was removed. And by the way, he's a friend of SWAPO. Maybe they are copying tactics from Gaddafi. So that's why I'm saying, you can be pretending to be peaceful for the next 60 years, but there will be a time when people will begin to turn against you. We can learn from ZANU-PF. I was once in a hotel at the former Sheraton, the Rainbow Towers, with Pendukeni Volaitana and Patrick Chinamaza. They were telling us, Chinamaza was complaining how the US ambassador then trained teachers, because they were using teachers as the at the elections. Now these teachers, long time, turned away from ZANU-PF. So now they were complaining how the American ambassador, I think his name was Dell at that time, used and trained teachers to turn the system upside down. That's how ZANU and Mugabe lost the 2009 elections. which Mbeki went and reversed later on. So history is very interesting, and we are not far from it. Now you are asking whether, by implication, Swartboy and us are now the anarchist party. And I see that's the same trend that Tito Mboweni, the failed minister of finance in South Africa, is trying to do. He always tweet whether EFF and Malema are anarchists. In fact, he used the word Bakunist, Bakunin in philosophy. Now, we are not syndical anarchists. We are not at that level yet, at least for now. But events that are happening in Karas and Harta, where people are being transported to go and register as voters, is painful. And we cannot tell our local people at the ground there what they must do. There are leaders there at their own, on their own. So we can't dictate to them, do A, B, C, or D. And especially when people from the parliament, like Lucia Vetwe Mbumba is doing, it's wrong. So we need to talk to Maureen Hinda, and the others must know, and especially Lucia Vetwe Mbumba. She must know that it is wrong what they are doing. People's patience will run out. Now, on your question of the Vilo and what he said, I think at the graduation of the soldiers, recruits, last month. Now, there are two things there. One, Vilo is the Minister of Defense. He used the army platform, space and time of the army, because he forgot that he went there as a civilian, just in line with his duties. And now that same Vilo, by the way, I removed the foreword that Hage wrote here. He used the Constitution. All of us, as members of parliament, pledged to uphold and to honor this book. Now Vilo goes there, knowing that he is a minister, member of parliament, and the executive. And then he issues, at a military parade, a very serious threat to the white community of this country. You know what it amounts to? First, he's telling the new recruits, be ready. There is a real enemy, no longer an emergent enemy. There is a real enemy, they are whites. We must target them. Now, in terms of the United Nations Conventions, that can be classified as hate speech, crime against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. And now the responsibility to protect, R2P, is very clear. Once his term of office is over, while he is still there, UN can come and grab Vilo and take him to The Hague for war crimes. Because what he's effectively doing is that after the white community, who is going to be targeted next by Vilo? Now, there is a Catholic during the times of Hitler, you know, who was saying, no, first they are starting with the Jews.
I kept quiet.
And I kept quiet. Then they came to probably the Christians, I kept quiet. Then they came to Catholics, I kept quiet. And then next, they came to me. Now, today, he's issuing a very misguided statement. I don't know, a man with a mosquito brain like Vilo, who does not understand economics proper, who told him that white monopoly capital is actually the white people that own it. No. If you start imperialism, colonialism, and how, even during the times of Karl Marx actually started to write about those things long time ago. Maybe I need to teach him Das Kapital, the capital, 1, 2, and 3, volume, 3 volumes, is that it transcended overall and it's not defined. White monopoly capital is just but a term that was used by Bell Pottinger to prop up. But it does not look at the race. What? Or pigmentation, the skin color. No. By the way, all of us have the same, whether you are black, white, we all have the same blood. So now what has happened is that he is misusing the terms, instigating the new recruits to attack. No longer the emergent enemy, but the real one now, which are white people. Now, are they now Germans who have got farms? Is it now Afrikaners? By the way, a lot of Afrikaners are poor, like us. They live in flats with us. They don't own huge lands, because sometimes people misunderstand what a German, an Afrikaner, and an Englishman mean. So they don't. Now, who are the new elites? the ones that forms part. And I will advise everybody to read The Wretch of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, the pitfalls of the national consciousness. It's very clear that the black bourgeoisie end up forgetting when they begin to govern. They forget about the masses. And what is happening is that there are now new elites. I won't be surprised if Vilo one day ends up like Saki Shangala and Bernard Esso in jail, because his name is slowly cropping up when we discuss and investigate NDF shenanigans. His name is making rounds there. I won't be surprised why he's hating on white community so much. Perhaps maybe he was denied a tender or an opportunity. So his statement was challenged by the managing director of Gondwana, Gys. He, in fact, Gys Joubert said, Vilo, I am not scared of you. Now, that's a level that Bernardus Warbo was referring to. If a citizen is so heartful, outraged by what is happening, now he begins to challenge a cabinet minister, which is at that stage of the class struggle where conflict takes place. Now, Gys Joubert is a good man. His company employs from 1,002 to so many people in tourism industry for many years. Now, if he comes out and express himself and say, look, what you are now doing, Vilo, is wrong. Now, you can't blame him for saying he's white, now he's challenging a black man. No, you can't. We are all part of the human race. And our policies are not saying it's anti-white or what. We merely discuss policy issues here. And I'm wondering, until today, why the President Hage Geingob did not call on Vilo to apologize, not only to the white community, but to all of us. Because I'm black, but I will never be in solidarity with a guy like Vilo. He can forget. He must not abuse the term black to seek opportunistic black solidarity. He's reached alone there with Bernard Esso, Saki Shangala, and the others. Majority of blacks are poor. And that is what we are going to defend. And therefore we say we reject him. I asked him in Parliament twice. I think it was on Wednesday and yesterday. Vilo failed to provide an answer. So my commitment is every day, as long as Vilo is there, I'm going to ask him a question every day. Because it's platforms that are provided. So Tuesday, expect another question from me, Wednesday, Thursday, until maybe they will use COVID and remove him, like they did with Utoni now. You don't see Utoni seated there. They removed him. It's part of Geingob's plan. So now, the focus is on Vilo. Maybe he might not go to Parliament on Tuesday, because there is nothing for him to say. So that's why it is. And I think the message is clear and loud. I think now we have come.
I just want to add one thing, Henny. You spoke so well. You know, Saki, when we are talking about issues of political nature, the evidence is out here. If we talk about corruption and homelessness and landlessness, we don't need to give a piece of paper called an exhibit to show that there is corruption. We don't need to show a piece of paper called Exhibit X to show there is homelessness. It is there for everyone to take judicial notice. It is a reality. When we speak about elections fraud and transportation of people, the evidence is there. You and I, we are here in Windhoek. The people calling us see what is happening. They may not have a phone like this to take a picture and decide this person is transported. But the evidence is there that in a small town, suddenly there are these other people that look different. That is the evidence. So every time as LPM in our short history, I want to place this very publicly. Every time we have raised an issue and we have said X, Y is happening, it always transpired exactly the same